Well, I don't have much money, and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call mine. And I've been deceived, yeah, but haven't we all? I've seen the sun rise, and I've seen the sun fall. Well, I don't know why, and I don't know where, and I don't even know how, and I no longer care. But I've seen your face, and I've heard your call. Yes, I've seen the sun rise, and I've seen the sun fall. I've seen the sun hang like a flame in the sky. Yes, I've seen the sun turn, and I've seen the sun rise. And I often think now, before our time is run, will there be any thoughts for what we have done? Well, I don't have much money, and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call mine.
Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. Am I here? Am I live? Not having a guest always makes me feel like I'm in the quietness of the studio, and I can never quite tell if I've gone live. But Adrian tells me I have gone live to 3 locations that he can see, so that's good. And send me a comment if you'd like to say hi. I'm always a bit nervous when I do reaction videos. And, now, Rochelle, I hear that that you've been trying to message me. I'm sorry I've missed those messages, but now I can see why I wish I had gotten your message there. Hi, everybody. Just want to announce that as of last night, my name has been officially taken off the church membership books. Wow, Rochelle. I will be sure to go and find your messages to me, and I'd love to arrange you to come on the program and talk about that whole experience. Wow. So, for some reason, the audience counter on my streaming platform here normally tells me if people are watching and how many people are watching, etc. But it's decided to switch itself off. And Rochelle is getting a lot of love and support there in the comments. And thanks everyone for the love and support. Well, we could just end the show there, Rochelle. That's amazing. People lately have said, "Oh, I'm more encouraging people to leave the church." To be honest, I haven't changed one bit my whole life. I'm pretty boring, and even doing these interviews over the last 3.5, 4 years in this platform to YouTube and Facebook, etc., to a more expanded audience than previously. I'm not saying leave. I left. I'm saying that maybe it's normalized. What I love is when people have a whole lot of information and evidence and data, and they look at it and they decide for themselves. So that's why I celebrate. So when I see Rochelle's announcement there, I'm excited, not because, one other person's left the Adventist church. I'm excited because they've looked at the information and made a decision for themselves. They've used that discernment, the Creator-given ability to discern for themselves what is best for them. And so when I, look at other people, I won't mention names, but there's plenty of other Adventists, liberal, progressives. I'll mention one name because we talked publicly about it, Bob Wolfgram, Dr. Bob Wolfgram. I had a fantastic chat with him the other day. And I have a lot of respect for him. Huge amount. He's been one of the biggest influences on me since 1979 with his music and the way he would talk and share his ideas. And so I'm excited that he has used his very capable mind to look at the data and analyze it. And for him, he is remaining a Seventh-day Adventist. And I'm excited because he has used his own mind to come to draw his own conclusions that work best for him and his family. And it was such an interesting interview because he really helped shape a lot of my thoughts about what I see as two sides within the church, the liberal progressives over here and the traditional Adventists on the other side. Generally speaking, there appear to be two sides that broke away unknowingly. And the traditional Adventists don't want the new theology. They don't want the Des Ford theology. They want it gone from the church. And the liberal progressives want to stay. They feel the church can change and benefit from their, as Bob Wolfgram put it, their revisionist mindset. So my interview with Bob really helped me. If you're watching, Bob, thank you very much. So look, let's talk about, let's get focused. I need everybody to help me on today's program because I think it's a really important topic. This is the lie at the heart of Glacier View. The lie, I'm going to write that down so I can bring it up. The lie at the heart of Glacier View. Now, if you don't know what Glacier View is, where have you been? You haven't been watching this show. So I'm going to read something that I put together and I asked Gillian Ford to just read it, correct anything, dates, things I might have gotten wrong. And Gillian and I don't agree on everything, but I think we agree that Des Ford was unfairly treated. And in my promotion post, I said that he was cheated out of a fair hearing. So what we're looking at today is not the theology. It's not who's right, who's wrong. We're looking at a specific, fabricated, intentional lie told post Glacier View right up until current times, when the Record magazine, the church magazine over here, did a retrospective. Sure, they were just reporting on the past, but they gave a bit of commentary on it, and they could have fixed this misperception, but they didn't. People often say, why are you still banging on about Des Ford? It's because leadership, perhaps the third group in this divided church, have not addressed this issue. And I believe until leadership does address it, and no, like I've talked to Gillian about this. Her and Des never were waiting on an apology. They knew what was going on. They weren't living their life victims. They never lived as victims. Des carried on and continued to preach the gospel with Gillian by his side, far and wide around the world, for 40 years after Glacier View. But many of us who look on, who were affected by this, I was in the church right up until 8 years ago. I was offered false hope, promises of change. It's all going to change from the liberal progressives. Thanks, guys. And the reality is, it's not going to change. The only glimmer of hope for any kind of change would be if leadership, and this would do a lot towards the healing of this topic, until the wounds are dressed and given medication, they're not going to heal. And you might be watching this in 40 years' time from now in some kind of digital format with your VR glasses on, and maybe people are still talking about it within the Adventist church, and maybe leadership still hasn't acknowledged this lie that is at the heart of Glacier View. So not the doctrines, not the theology, the lie. Now, what will I do first? I want to play a clip. I'm very excited to announce that I've been doing, I've started them already, SDAQ&A clips. I've put 2 up, and they're for people who have a shorter attention span for my longer format SDAQ&A reaction videos, commentaries, and interviews and conversations. So if if you want to get a bit of SDA Q&A, but you really only want 5 to maybe 15 minutes, these SDA clips are for you. So when you go on to, and I'm about to play one, and I think John Denne is watching. This is a fantastic little clip from a longer interview I did with him, coming up right now. So this when you go to YouTube, it'll be on YouTube. not so much in Facebook. You can choose videos, shorts, or live. Live is here, where we do this every week, 3 times a week. The shorts I've been uploading, that's a whole other thing. But if you go to videos, you'll see a list of videos that I upload, not live. And that's where these SDA clips will be. Now, this one's only about 4 minutes long. I'm going to play it with the intro as well, because it just gives you a bit of fun to see how the presentation is going to be for these. And I'm playing this one now before we talk about the lie at the heart of Glacier View, and I expose it. John Denne, in an interview I did with him in season 6, I believe, episode number 5, he articulates so beautifully this debt of gratitude that the Seventh-day Adventist Church owes to Des and Gillian Ford. Let's watch it now, and we'll get some of your thoughts later in the comments as well. Now, how do I work this? Okay, I think we've got it now. Let's give it a go.
Seems to me in the Record article it refers to Ford. It doesn't say Desmond Ford, or it does once or twice, but mostly it just says Ford. And it seems to me that the author is endeavouring to disparage the influence of Dr. Ford. I think that people that do that don't understand what's most important in Christianity. We claim as Adventists with Revelation 14 to be those who are taking the gospel to all the world. Therefore, the clarity of the gospel should be the most significant thing that we have to bring to the world, with the other expression there about worshipping the Creator and so on. Well, when Dr. Ford died, Fandel wrote in the world paper of the church, Gerhard Fandel, he wrote that most Adventist scholars and pastors, I'm quoting, most Adventist scholars and pastors today have accepted Dr. Ford's definition of righteousness by faith. I mean, St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 says that what is of most importance, the most important thing, is the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. That is the gospel, he says. So that should be what is most important to us. And if the world paper of the church should write that most Adventist scholars and pastors have accepted Ford's definition of righteousness by faith, then we should be rejoicing in the legacy of Dr. Ford, not trying to run him down, run down his legacy. Furthermore, William Johnson, the former editor of the Review and Herald, he wrote in Spectrum magazine, and I quote again, whereas before Glacier View, many, perhaps most Adventists lacked the assurance of salvation through grace alone, slowly the liberating message of the gospel permeated the church. These changes can be traced in a large measure to Glacier View and Des's ministry. Anyone who has that influence in any denomination is worthy of saying, thank you, God, for that person, not to try and undermine what they have done. That is far more important than interpreting some prophecy of Scripture.
Yes, so
Do
true.
you get what I'm saying?
100%, so true.
And that, of course, is why Avondale University wanted to hold a memorial service for Dr. Ford's family at Avondale University. But of course, that was denied, and I grieve that to this day, that the church could be so unkind. That it staggers me. I think I've said to you before that I've taken a funeral for Buddhists, and I would for the family of the local prostitute who had died. But here's someone who's foremost in bringing the gospel to the Adventist church. His family are denied that solace. It's unbelievable. Anyway, that's another subject.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was hugely powerful there, John Denne. Here's someone, Des Ford, who left an incredible legacy, continued preaching the gospel around the world, was always positive, strong to his convictions, man of fortitude, a person with an incredible Northern Star guide, allowing him to focus on his mission. Here he is, and in the articles there that John Denne read, that the changes within the Adventist Church that have led to greater assurance for its members, many of its members have taken on board a wonderful understanding of righteousness by faith and grace. And I think one of the authors was Bill Johnson, who we'll get to in a minute. In that article, after Des had died, said that this can be traced back to the teachings and influence and legacy of Des Ford. And that little clip there, and as I said, you can go there into videos and watch it. I would recommend you watch that little 4-minute clip several times, because there are just so many good things there that John Denne said that need to be reflected upon. Now, I'm coming up to close to 400 interviews now over the last 3-4 years. And I've had so many different people on the program, all kinds of Adventists, formers, currents, agnostics, Gnostics, you name them. They've been on the program. I believe in giving people the opportunity to speak and share their beliefs. And I believe, and I've offended some liberals and progressives, some revisionists, because I've challenged them, not attacked, but challenged them to defend, in my humble opinion, and I only left 8 years ago. The mirror is back on me. More could have been done to defend this gentleman, Dr. Desmond Ford. Okay, so I'm going to read a background statement. This is the one I mentioned earlier, where it's disappeared. That'll be right. I can cut and paste it. No worries. This is one I wrote as in the last few months as I've been pondering today's program, which I didn't know it was going to be today, but it just turned out to be that way. But I knew it was coming up, and I sent this, what I'm about to read now, to Gillian Ford, and I asked her to just check dates and things, and anything that should be taken out, added, that kind of thing. And she sent this back to me. And so I'm just going to read it because I think that way it more fairly represents what we're talking about here. For those who aren't so familiar with Glacier View, with Des Ford, with what we're talking about here, with the revisionists and the traditional Adventists, and the chalk and cheese war that's going on to this day within Adventism, that the leaders, the third group, won't even address, quite shamefully, I might add. And bear with me, as I read this in my laid back, slow voice. But here it is, and I called it The Lie at the Heart of Glacier View. Des Ford, well-known Seventh-day Adventist scholar, academic, theologian, truth seeker, and all-round person of integrity, began to raise questions about the claims made by Ellen White and the church founders on the sanctuary teaching. Which were supported and held by the Adventist Church from its inception. Scholars started speaking to him about these problems in the late 1950s. He tried for several decades to find solutions to the problems associated with the doctrine of the investigative judgment. The CBs in Australia, the concerned brethren, the traditional Adventists, tried repeatedly to have him fired in the 1960s and the 1970s. But the event that brought things to a head was the publication of Robert Brinsmead's book, 1844 Re-Examined, which was published in July 1979. At the same time, he was writing his commentary on the book of Revelation, and he realized that historicists through the ages had applied the events of the book of Revelation to their own day. And Adventists had done the same thing in the 19th century. This crystallized his thinking. He was asked by the PUC Forum to take a meeting answering Bob Brinsmead's book, 1844 Re-Examined. He reluctantly agreed. As a result of the forum, he was taken out of the classes at PUC. His contract there was broken, and he was called to defend himself and write a position paper at the GC headquarters in Washington, D.C. The leaders called for a conference to be held in Colorado at a retreat center called Glacier View. And if you want to learn more about Glacier View, I've got 86 programs on it in season 2. You can find that on Facebook and slowly being uploaded to YouTube as well. By the end of the week-long gathering, which had been sold to Des Ford as being an opportunity for him to simply share his divergent views and concerns in a safe environment. No, it was pretty clear he would be fired at the end. Dr. Desmond Ford essentially lost his job and was defrocked. The wheels, at least, were set in motion on the final day of the meetings. Post-Glacier View, a lie was sown. This incredible lie has remained hidden until recently. The perpetrator of the lie revealed what actually happened at Glacier View and bravely set the record straight. And if you want to see that whole interview, season 2, episode 1, where William G. Johnson, Dr. William G. Johnson, sets the record straight. And even though that program has had thousands of views, 3 or 4 years later, the Adventist Church, having had many opportunities to recognize that lie, admit the lie, and begin some kind of journey towards reconciliation, still has their head in the sand. So here's the lie, and we'll get further into it later, and it summarizes the reason why the axe fell on Des and how Glacier View had in fact been a kangaroo court. Leaders knowing full well before time that Des and Gillian just had to go. The lie. In 1984, the aforementioned Bill Johnson on the John Ankerberg show said, the Glacier View group did not see light in Des's view. However, in 2020 on my show, he said on Friday, the consensus statement was brought to the floor, it was read, it was discussed, it was voted. If not unanimously, very close. And Ford said, I can agree with everything in this statement. Many people left after lunch thinking a positive outcome had been achieved and that Des and Gillian would be staying on. But here's what happened next. After lunch, Des and Gillian were asked to go into a back room and have a further non-judgmental, informal discussion. At this unofficial, unvoted on, very irregular and unusual meeting, the leadership wheeled out a 10-point statement that essentially highlighted some additional points that Des was asked if he could agree on. These were outside the consensus statement that had been discussed and voted on earlier that day. And Des announced in that small backroom meeting that no, he couldn't, in all conscience, go against those. All the while thinking that this little ambush was innocent and really only the leaders exploring some issues that may warrant further discussions, he and Gillian, in good faith, did not realize that it was these very 10 points that would be used and weaved into the final adjudication of Ford's dismissal. They were ambushed, tricked, and hoodwinked. In 1984, Bill Johnson perpetuated the myth following Glacier View that the majority did not agree with Des. And yet, as I've just said, in 2020, Bill Johnson was brave enough to confess he had not fully been open way back when it would have actually made the most effective impact. So, for a complete analysis of this seemingly complex disaster and misuse of power by such leaders as Neil Wilson and Keith Parmenter, go back and watch season 2. And I highly recommend that you go and buy Gillian Ford's Road to Glacier View volumes. They're available on Amazon, and help share this story, one of Adventism's most shameful. So I want to play now, and then we're going to go to some of your comments and thoughts. But here are the two key components of that little story we shared, the lie at the heart of Glacier View. So here is it goes for 1 minute, and this is the lie. This is it.
Desmond Ford's teachings were tested against the scripture, and the Glacier View group testing them against the scriptures did not see light in his view. It is out of that context, not against Ellen White.
Friday morning, the consensus statement that we developed was brought to the floor. It was read, it was discussed, and it was voted. If not unanimously, very close. And very interestingly, Desmond Ford said, I can agree with everything in this statement.
You know, I'd like to play those two little clips over and over to you. Bill Johnson says, 1984, that Glacier View, the folk that were there, and we're talking maybe 120, 130 people, academics, scholars, I think lay people from all around the world. I think over 120 people. He says in that program that the Glacier View group of people, when held against scripture, saw no light. I don't know why he said that. I'm not judging him. And I'm so grateful that he shared the true story. On my program, season 2, episode 1. And you saw the snippet of that. That on the Friday, after a week long looking at scripture, Bible study groups, main room discussions, Hazel, I think you pronounce it, and Fritz Guy put together this 2-part consensus statement. Really one, agreed upon document. And they voted on it, and the majority agreed with it. And they left feeling a sense of hope that this message that Des Ford was bringing into the Adventist church, which was potentially aligning it more adequately with the Bible, was going to be infused into the church. So let's not worry about the doctrine, the theology, who's right, who's wrong. The lie was consensus for agreement with Des Ford's teaching was not reached at Glacier View. The truth is, it was. The lie, no consensus reached. The truth, consensus agreement was reached with the teachings and views of Des Ford. Now, this, I think, essentially split the church in two. And my good friends, the liberal progressive revisionists, just can't accept that. And so they're trying to revise it. Good on you, you guys, you liberal progressives. the people who recently I seem to have upset by challenging and asking you to speak up. The church, and maybe this third group, as I was going to say, the leaders, maybe they had foresight and they realized that if you start challenging the authority of Ellen G. White, the whole thing is going to fall and collapse. Maybe they were right. Maybe they did the right thing. But if they did, what they have set in motion is a system and movement and denomination that cannot question Ellen G. White's authority. And so we are left with the traditional Adventists being supported by then and now. Neil Wilson then, Ted Wilson now, supports the traditional Adventist theology. And the liberal progressive revisionists go, stay, use, you know what I've always said, I respect when you use your mind and stay and you draw your own conclusions. That's great. But please stop thinking that you're somehow going to be able to work it out with the traditional Adventists and somehow welcome them into the bigger tent. You're not. It's not going to happen. They don't want you there. The tent itself was constructed by them, and the circus ringmaster does not support your liberal progressive theology and never will any of the ringmasters ever in Adventism come on board with accepting you wholeheartedly. Oh, those who have, accepted but have some varied views with Des's ideas, that's okay. We welcome you. They're not going to welcome you. You're not. You can stay. You can continue trying to revise. It might give you a sense of activism, a purpose and meaning. Good on you. That is fantastic. Stay. But do not offer false hope to people like me, who was just a young teenager at the time and didn't fully grasp it, but gave my whole life to Adventism. Propelled by the liberal progressives, 10 years older than me and beyond, that it's going to change. You were just thinking standards. That's what you thought I was talking about. No, I was talking about the theology. And most of my generation were too, and most of my generation left the Adventist Church, but I stayed. And I think some of you don't believe it when I say if you use your own mind, weigh up the facts, decide for yourself, draw your own conclusions, that if you decide to stay, I don't think you believe me when I say I mean it. Good on you. I respect people that use their brains and discernment, their God-given gift. And but shout it from the rooftop. That's my challenge. I'm not challenging you or your beliefs. I'm just saying, if you believe that, then to stop throwing people like me under the bus. Be bold. Stand up for this new theology within Adventism, this assurance of your salvation traced back largely to the teachings of Des Ford. Embrace it. Hold it in your heart with love and passion, and let the young people of the church know that you're there and that they can turn to you when they think the Ted Wilson structure is the only option they have. That's my challenge to the liberal progressive revisionists. Stand out. Be bold. I'm not bagging the church. I'm not bagging you. I'm not angry. I'm passionate. I'm not angry. I go to sleep happy every night. I promise you. I'm very happy. And for me, I left. That's okay too. And we've got one of our group here, Rochelle, who has just written and said that as of last night, she's officially got the documentation that she has left the Adventist Church. We celebrate her thinking process. So yeah, this lie that there was no consensus agreement, perpetuated sadly by the leaders and Bill Johnson for the last 44 years. Whereas the truth was that consensus agreement was reached. And the sad reality is a lot of you progressive liberal revisionists and rebels who stayed, you weren't allowed to speak up so loud about it, were you? A line was drawn in the sand. Are you a CB? Are you a Fordite? Come on, don't lie to me if you say that never happened. The 80s were just pockmarked with that question. Paraphrased, said in different ways, spoken of in euphemistically. You guys had to go underground and share your tapes. Des Ford would come to town and you'd secretly go off. When Des came to do a talk, Des and Gillian came and did a talk for me. When was it? I've just done a program recently on it. When was it, Gillian, if you're watching? I literally went into the little, the crying room they have there where there's a speaker, but parents with babies can go in and still listen to the sermon and the babies can be fed and cry and whatever. Settled. It was full of 15 or 16 young ministers eager to hear Des Ford, but not wanting to be seen. My number one and only criticism of liberal progressive revisionists. So grow up, stop thinking I'm attacking you. I'm not bagging the church. I don't have an axe to grind. I'm not at all trying to bring down the church. I'm just saying that my number one criticism of you is be bold and let your light shine. You have a responsibility to do that because you know full well that inside the Seventh-day Adventist Church, there are many, many landmines that the unsuspecting new member or young member can step on. So before you go off and have your little discussions that, Pete Dixon's changed, he's become one of those formers that's very anti the Adventist Church. Wake up to yourself. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying you will do damage. Your legacy will be lost. You're all getting older now, aren't you? You're in your 70s. Speak up. I loved that that little clip I played there of John Denne, and there's a whole 2.5 hour episode of that if you've got a longer attention span. And I just posted another one with Larry Geraghty. It's incredible. And that's not even the season 2. These guys, now that they're retired, are really speaking up boldly. Anyway, the fact is, there was a lie at the heart of Glacier View that had nothing to do with doctrine and theology. It had everything to do with politics and scrubbing out dissension. And the lie that there was no consensus agreement is just a shameful one that has been perpetuated for 44 years. So liberal progressive revisionists, do yourself a favor and share with everyone you know what that lie is. And that, in fact, Bill Johnson himself exposed it in my interview, season 2, episode 1, where he said in that clip that a vote was taken, consensus was agreed upon, and the majority agreed. So the lie is that the majority didn't see light in Des Ford, and the truth is the majority did see truth. The lie is that the majority did not see light in Des's message and teachings. The truth is the majority did see truth and light in his message. So you all went underground after Glacier View. I'm suggesting it's time to let those little daisies pop up before you're a different kind of daisy popping up. So I'm going to play that clip. It's 1 minute, as I said, and there's some great photos of Des at the end there. I'm going to leave in there. There's 3 photos of him as a young man, him as an older teacher, and him running that race with joy on his face. Watch closely to this. Lean in. Write down what is said. Transcribe it. You'll see the lie. You'll see the truth.
Desmond Ford's teachings were tested against the scripture. And the Glacier View group, testing them against the scriptures, did not see light in his view. It is out of that context, not against Ellen White.
Friday morning, the consensus statement that we developed was brought to the floor. It was read, it was discussed, and it was voted. If not unanimously, very close. And very interestingly, Desmond Ford said, I can agree with everything in this statement.
Powerful, powerful stuff. If you'd like to, I think, access, and this is nothing to do with me, I literally just happened to be in the front seat, unprepared, ignorant, with a microphone and an inquiring mind. But if you want to really grasp Glacier View, Des Ford, and this shameful era, nothing to do with whether you agree with Des or not. This shameful political suppression which goes on within the Adventist Church to this day. Look at women's ordination. Look at this new thing coming up. I'm going to do a program on it. Let's just see. Well, let's see if it works. Hang on. I don't know if that worked or not.
Execute Order 60.
I might have to work on that one. I'm going to do a program on this new policy order that's been voted in that's going to, sounds like, allegedly limit the freedom that Adventist workers have in expressing their views publicly. And it's called Order 6 or something. GC Working Order number 6. And on Star Wars, and they've got Execute Order 66. And I thought, there's some parallels there. So that's going to come later on. But yeah, this, if you want to get 2 resources to really understand this shameful era that continues to this day to try and suppress and cookie cut Seventh-day Adventist members, go and watch season 2. It's only 86 episodes. And go and buy the road to Glacier View. Gillian Ford's, I think, Gillian, are you up to number 9? And they are incredible, richly filled with letters, articles, private correspondence. Insanely amazing resource. So if you've got, a few months to spare, buy all the books, watch all 86 of season 2. I'm not even sure if it's up on YouTube yet. I think 5 episodes are. So yeah, there we go. And look, we've got a really interesting cross-section of people watching today, confirming, as I've always said, that SDAQ&A is not an echo chamber. Let's put down our guns and let's discuss this stuff. Let's try and bring about a resolution. It's not going to be resolving people's theology. You're never going to agree with that. But some kind of soothing balm that can allow people to move on and practice their faith unhindered by the shame of history that we've all had a part to play in. Okay, so that's me for that little summary of what I'm saying is the lie at the heart of Glacier View, which was that a consensus statement for agreement with Des Ford's teachings was not reached. In fact, the lie is that the majority went against Des Ford, whereas the truth is that literally did not happen. The majority did reach consensus and agreement, and even Des Ford said, yeah, I can go along with that. I'm dying to play that other clip one more time. I won't, but I've watched that 1 minute clip. It's less than that. It's 40 seconds. Over and over. And there's just tiny little, very clear demonstrations of the lie. Okay, I haven't had the chat open for me to watch, so I'm just going to go back and see if there's anything that you guys would like to add, comment on, or share with me. And I'm just going to bring up, Rochelle has said that as of yesterday, she's left the church. And do I have to say again that I'm for people using their own minds? I sometimes feel like I say that 1 billion times and still people don't get it. That's all right. I'm used to it. Leaving has made me feel that I am now free to study and follow where the truth leads without being required to accept the prescribed answers of the SDA Church or anything other than the group. I feel lighter. Come on the show, Rochelle. I'll track down those messages. And this is where the third branch of Adventism, leadership, they've got their own movement, the leaders, their own pay scales, their own backslapping boys club. They saw this. They knew that they would lose the money. Who is, what do they call it? Who is the golden goose of Adventism? Ellen G. White. So Sola Scriptura 21 says if the progressives want change, they will need to get rid of Ellen G. White as having the spirit of prophecy. And the leaders know they can't do that because they will not get the money anymore. I often ponder, I've had people on the show absolutely decimate, criticize, deconstruct with absolute precision, the precision of a surgeon. And I watch the comments and people go, yeah, well said. Oh, mate, well said. I'll say a way milder version of that. Whoa, Pete, you've got an axe to grind. You're bagging the church. It's just a funny observation. Why is that? It's probably because I'm not an academic. So what right do I have to share my opinion? It's not backed by a PhD. Okay. And Ray makes a very good point. Neil Wilson was an Ellenist. Des Ford threatened the authority of Pope Ellen. And I've discovered that the liberal progressive revisionists are also Ellenists. Apart from people like John Rosier, who never really had that kind of upbringing, there's plenty of people that aren't Ellenists, and he is someone I would call a progressive revisionist. But I've been surprised at how many liberal progressives love Ellen. Rochelle writes, in light of the Vine and Kelly situation, looking at the processes enforced by leadership and making sure the powers that be are being held accountable is more important than ever, in my opinion. It's interesting that Conrad Vine, he's of the traditional Adventist set. He's been called the Martin Luther of Adventism. And yet the mainstream, this third arm of Adventism, this third branch, is absolutely suppressing, ostracizing, cancelling him like crazy right now. Do you see any parallels? Des Ford was called the Martin Luther of the Adventist Church. And look how he and Gillian were treated. And any of you had to go quiet or you got the boot. So it seems like the third arm, the third branch. They are doing exactly the same as they always have, maintaining power, authority, influence, and for what? Monetary gain, I'm afraid. And Rick writes, I read just last week a prominent SDA pastor equating Des to a tool of Satan. Yeah, clueless thing to say, isn't it? And so are the majority. I've been called a tool of Satan. Very good point here, Rick. Des's destiny was decided before Glacier View, 100%. And that's why the 10-point statement that we mentioned earlier, and I always say was wheeled out, because they didn't get him. They thought that, after a week they'd have convinced everybody, browbeaten them down to submission, but the academics and scholars and revisionists and liberal progressives were like, no, we want Des to stay. Let's make it work. Good on you guys. Well done. Good on you. But you weren't going to win. It was already decided. Woo! As Ray says, the Glacier View, Colorado witch hunt was a charade. Rick says, Peter, are you still uploading season 2? Yes, I am. And I've probably made it confusing. It's at a separate YouTube channel. And it's got like 20 subscribers. It's so hard. I might just, I don't know. I want them to be all in one place. So if you're watching YouTube, come and join our Facebook group. They're all there. You just type in, season 2, episode 1, and it'll come up in the search bar of the Facebook group. But I have got this other group. I'll try and put a link now in this program. Cindy Lou writes, and Cindy Lou, we've set up a Signal Messenger, like a WhatsApp thing, place for everyone who wants to keep the conversation going that's not in the Facebook group. If you're interested, just look up SDAQ&A on Signal. The more I study the reverse engineered LNG things, the more lies I find that were deliberately fed to me. Yeah, Romish popery equals 101, E.G. White. Oh dear. 666. And it pisses me off that people just ignore the injustice shown to Des. They ignore it. Oh, look. And I believe that the liberal progressives who have stayed have still got a glimmer, a little opportunity left to shine brightly and publicly. And it frustrates me that they don't, but all they hear is the frustration and think I'm judging them or attacking them. No. I'm just wanting you to do it before the memory is dimmed and the influence fades. And Ray says, John Denne, why don't you leave the Adventist abomination? And I've chatted to John about this. And as I said, he is someone that has weighed up the evidence, used his own brain to draw his own conclusions, and I respect that he has stayed. And Rick, have we done a show on the leaving element? Can you message me about that? I left Adventism 6 months ago. I just couldn't plant my flag in the camp that ignores honesty and transparency. Exactly. And he adds, what they did to Des and Gillian is just irksome. Cindy Lou writes, SDAs at nearly every level simply do not like even a hint that they are wrong. You've nailed it. Oh, man. In my season 2, Cindy, I don't know if you've seen it, but all the liberal progressives, thank you, Peter. Whoa, this is amazing, because I was giving it to the leadership and I was giving it to the conservative traditional Adventists. But as soon as it became apparent that I was also going to shine a little bit of light on their own journey, woo, I would say that, boy, the backlash I've had from the liberal progressives has been worse than any of the others, because these guys are skilled at the nuanced ad hominem attack. One guy wrote, oh, well, you took the church's money all those years doing gigs, and now you're just trashing them. Hey, what money? 90% of it was for free. And any money I made was, eventually it did become half my income, but my income was like under half of what the average person here earns. So it was minimal, my friend. Rick says, I pray for my SDA friends, but how can people breathe with their heads in the sand? Backroom dealing. Sounds cultic to me, says Andy Mack. And Milton's book. Yes, I should have promoted that. I actually meant to. I'm so glad you reminded me. Season 2, SDAQ&A. Gillian's, it'll be 10-volume series. At least 8 are available now on Amazon. This is available on Amazon, totally refreshed and revised, and any little errors have been fixed. And tell me if I'm wrong, Gillian. I think you and Milton gave me permission to do an audiobook of this, which I have started working on. So maybe we need to chat that you did give me permission and I'm not just dreaming. Those 3, tell you what, you'll know everything about Glacier View once you've watched season 2, read Gillian's books, and read Milton Hook's book. Milton is a genius. John Rosier, genius. Sir Nilo says, did I miss the best bits? Look, the big takeaway is just this, Sir Nilo. The lie. Consensus for agreement with Des Ford's teachings was not reached at Glacier View. The majority were against Des and did not see light in Des's teachings. That's the lie. The truth is, no, the majority actually reached consensus with Des Ford's, agree with his teachings and views, and he said he could go along with it too. So yeah, you've caught up there, Sir Nilo. And Andy Mack says she was literally watching the Walter Martin interview yesterday. Is that the Walter Martin and Bill Johnson one that we're talking about? That one is brilliant. I've watched that 30 or 40 times. And the other brilliant one is the Des Ford and Walter Ray one too. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. There are lots of messages, but we're just... Yeah, this is an interesting one from Schley. Who's going to be the honourable whistleblower to release that consensus statement? Now, I know Matthew Lucio is doing a podcast right now on Glacier View, and he had access. He's the only one I know that's had access to the audio recordings of the Glacier View meetings. And I asked him if he'd come to the point where they voted on the consensus statement. And he said he hasn't come to that point. And I dare say if he does and releases it on his podcast, he'll lose his job with the church. That's how crazy they are. You'll lose your job if you disagree with the Adventist template. And yet Adventists say, oh, I can believe this and I can believe that. Sure, go for it until you say it publicly. Then the cookie cutter comes down, chops this off and that off. You're publicly humiliated, suppressed, and you'll go slinking back to your church, tail between your legs. And Mimi West writes, the SDA church is built on so many lies. I think people just want a bit of honesty with, just put it all out. Release all the audio recordings and everything in the Ellen White estate. And I don't think it'll damage Ellen White or the church at all. I think it'll improve people's acceptance of leadership. And Rick points out a very good theme here, that the highly conservative traditional SDAs actually feel like liberals are slowing down the coming of Christ because they are not focused on sinless perfection and remnant privilege. This is interesting. Andy writes, the anger, fear, hurt, etc. all left when I left. Yeah. I've had people that should know better say that, oh, he's just angry and trying to bring the church down because his father was badly treated. And that is so not true. And yes, my dad was unfairly treated, but I don't think in over 350 interviews I've ever mentioned that. He's never been bitter about it. And yeah, so I'm not trying to attack and pull down the church based on any of my experiences. I'm just observing. And I tell you what, being front row and centre here has taught me a lot. Rochelle writes, have you thought about being an audiobook narrator? I'm not sure if you saw me hold this one up when you posted that. I probably will have a go at being the... Let's see. Let's just see how I can go. More critics. Des's February article in the Record was sent by a Queensland church member to Douglas at the review office. In reply, Douglas revealed that the top level of the church was on the warpath against the gospel advocates. He confided, I can imagine that the picture looks somewhat bleak down under, when the prevailing winds seem to blow from a new and strange Ford Brinsmead mateship. Yeah, I don't think I actually would be that good at it. I might have to pay someone. Yeah, and Sir Nilo says it takes a brave man to tell the truth on national TV. And here's the interesting thing is when Bill Brinsmead told the truth on our show, it was only on Facebook. It's still not on... Oh, it is on YouTube now, his interview. But it was a small private group. So maybe he thought no one was ever going to watch it. I don't think he or anyone just realized I'm a bit persistent. So Nilo writes, Ted Wilson should see those 2 clips of yours, Peter. Ted actually watches the show sometimes. I won't say the connection, but a good friend of mine literally knows Ted personally. And when Ted's in Australia, he stays with them. And I told him to ask him on the show, and he declined. Rochelle writes, when I played that clip earlier, sure it's not Order 666. Yeah, Mimi West writes, it was so uncomfortable watching Johnson on the Ankerberg show. I'd love to know how he got the job of going on there. He drew the short straw. He sure did. Not sure if he said it on my show, in the show, or if it was before. He certainly regretted going on that show. It haunted him his whole life, he said. It followed him, not haunted him. And he just felt that he didn't do a good job. And Mimi adds, it's true, you can't have an Adventist church without Ellen. You can't. Lutherans are proud of their name. SDAs should just call themselves Ellerans. Elenorans. Elnorans. And live with it. How do we know when William Johnson was telling the truth? Well, there are plenty of other eyewitnesses that were there. If you go and have a look at my 14-minute SDAQ&A clips number 2, I've just posted this morning with Larry Geraghty, he confirms, yeah, I was there. We all voted. We were excited. Des went along with it. And in my season 2, episodes 1 to 86, many people I interviewed were there. That's what's so historic about it. Again, nothing to do with me. I feel like it happened without me doing anything. I claim nothing special with my involvement with that, but many of them confirmed. Yeah. What? And say, hey, says, how could Neil Wilson agree with Des Ford? Yeah, he didn't agree with Des because I think Neil knew, as does Ted, his son, that if you diminish the authority of Ellen G. White, which Des was essentially doing by saying the Sanctuary Doctrine and the IJ was wrong, and Ellen had said she'd seen it in vision that it was right. You start to diminish her authority, Adventism is over. Collectively. Might not be in your little church or your little Sabbath school room, but collectively. Adventism without Ellen White, it's over. Now, Kurt, how are you? Haven't had Kurt write much before. SDAs are sometimes confused that standing up for Adventism is equivalent to standing up for the gospel of Christ. So they fall silent when the system contradicts the truth, if they recognize it. I'm not sure what Platter, please help me understand how you can respect a MSN. And sorry, Peter, not Platter. Please tell me how you can respect a man who stays in a blasphemous, heretical, demonic cult. I don't get it. Yeah, well, I've known John Denne all my life, and he was there for me during a very, very difficult, shall we say, health crisis when I was a young man. And yeah. So I guess, I respect him for that. And because he is speaking up, and because maybe he might eventually go, you know what, I can embrace and share the gospel more effectively if I leave the Adventist church. And I think back to me, even 10 years ago, I wouldn't have really respected me for a lot of my ideas and beliefs and stances and defense of Adventism. And I'm glad that people still respected me and therefore gave me the chance to speak freely and to eventually draw some different conclusions. I thought I'd drawn the conclusions already. Stay in the church, make a change from the inside. There's lots of good things. We've got the Sabbath, we've got haystacks, we've got the gospel, we've got Des Ford over there. So I respect him, whether he changes his mind or not, but in the same sense that I look back at young me 10 years ago, young 50-year-old me, and cut myself some slack for room to change. And I really greatly value the people that respected me and offered me a safe place to share, but also those who confronted me and cajoled me. That's why I love your involvement with the group, you and Ray. And I love it because we're all offering key ingredients here in the process of waking up, in the process of deconstructing people from some pretty intense brainwashing. So, yeah, I respect people who cajole and say things like you just did, that this is a blasphemous, heretical, demonic cult. And I respect people who say, hey, people need respect for where they're at. And I find that anyone who is using their mind to process and not just believe, people who have a warmth and kindness and a charity and an ability to process data, I respect that. Not sure if that answers your question, but thank you for asking it. Oh, this is nice. Peter Dixon, genius. And I laugh because Adrian's my good mate. And he's one of those ones that accepts me as I am. Thank you, Adrian. Say hey, you'd be interesting to interview on the show. American Swan. I think Adventist pastors are very quiet about issues. So true. Did you watch my recent interview, 7 questions you need to ask your local SDA pastor, with Rodrigo Custodio, who will be on again in a couple of weeks, and we'll have 7 more questions to ask them. These questions, they make the Adventist pastor squirm, and I've done one on 7 questions that SDA pastors won't answer publicly. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Have I seen you before? You do? Welcome, if not. Lots of SDA infighting. Do you know what? That's one of the main things I feel like I'm wanting to address as an observer. I feel like I'm the guy on the park bench watching everyone go by and how they interact. And Adventists fight amongst themselves more than any other denomination, in my humble opinion. And I've observed other denominations for 40 years as well, 30 years. And I'd love to help address that and try and create a space where you guys, instead of going, oh, Pete's attacked me, I don't like him anymore, you can go, hey, okay, what's he saying? Let's not think about and attack the person. Let's talk about the content or the claim or what's being said. Let's address that. Thanks, you do. Andy Mack writes, cult equals, if you don't believe what's in our basket, you won't be saved. Yeah. Ellen White reconsidered. Has anyone ever described to you the role of Leroy Moore and the documentary evidence he presented at Glacier View? No. Let me know all about it. So much I don't know. Thank you, David. Born on the 21st of the 12th. You're doing a good thing, Peter. The SDA cult is bound to fail. It's not the gospel. Heard some flat earthers say that Australia does not exist. So, Nilo, Peter, can you confirm? Hang on a second. Yes, the land outside the window appears to be there. I've been told it's called Australia. This show and others are leading souls back to Christ out of the darkness of the disciples of Ellen White. Keep it up. Thanks, David. That was a great interview. Thank you. Rochelle, I appreciate the invite to come on the show. I'd like to eventually, but I need to have some hard conversations with extended family first before sharing my story publicly online. I remember you saying that, Rochelle. Thank you. Let's keep in touch. Say, hey, Ankerberg invited Johnson to be on the show with Ford and Ray. That's true. He invited also Neil Wilson and others to be on the show, and every other leader declined. See, there's another thing. Do you respect Bill for perpetuating that lie, or maybe even starting it? We can't judge people for where they are at any given time. The pressures that people are under. We all think, oh, I'd be a superhero if I was placed in that situation. Yeah, really? Would you? Come on, you're just a weak little human like me. Who knows how we would respond under certain situations. Where I think people like Johnson deserve respect is that at some point he did come clean, Bob, hey, Rob, Bob Wolfgram's watching. Thanks again for that interview the other day. And look, maybe I'm still learning and I haven't got it right, but I really appreciated the concept of, instead of saying, the progressive liberal gospel Adventists, whatever, that there's an arm of the church called revisionists. You taught me that, but maybe I'll read what you're saying. Maybe you're still thinking I haven't got it right, and you might be right. But you've Bob Wolfgram Senior has just written, "Thank you, Peter. Your approach today reminded me of this from our dear friend Robert Brinsmead back in the day, from my compilation of interviews Lowell Tarling and I conducted with him in 1977 to 1981. Adventism is totally incompatible with the gospel, and to fool around thinking that it can be brought into line with the gospel is only a pipe dream. I see now it is no accident. Once upon a time, I used to look at Adventism's struggle. Wagner, Jones, Ballinger, Fletcher, and men had come along all through the history of the church, who'd reached out and tried to discover some of the New Testament outlook, and had tried to bring that into the community, and they had always been clobbered." This is Robert Brinsmead, still his quote. "I'd looked at it. This is a rather innocent aberration of Adventism because they don't know what they're doing, and it's unfortunate, but one day this gospel will break through. But now I see that Adventism, by the very fact of what it is, has to fight that thing to the death. The two are totally incompatible." Thanks, Bob Wolfgram. Always insightful, and will go down, and even at my last breath, as being one of the 5 people who influenced me the most on my faith journey. Thank you, Bob. I made myself some haystack sauce the other night. Like it's kind of really a copy of nachos or some kind of Mexican corn chips and salad, whatever. But the Adventist haystacks, Adventists got that down to an art form, and I made this incredible sauce last night, and it was my grandma's recipe. And David writes, "There are many good Christians in the Adventist Church, a majority, I'd say. It's the disciples of Ellen White that control everything." Michael C. writes, "Peter, do you still love me?" Did I love you in the first place, Michael? I don't think we'd reached that stage. And Rick reminds us that we've asked Michael C. on the show many times. Keeps running away. And David writes to Rochelle, "Stand strong, Rochelle. Do it your way." Yeah, you know what? As I may have mentioned on the program before, when I left the church on the Friday, I wrote on Facebook, "This is my last Sabbath as a Seventh-day Adventist." On the Sunday, Dad popped round to visit me, put his arms on my shoulder, and he said, "Son, you've done the right thing. You're your own person." And that's the phrase, become your own person. That's the challenge. Stop being a sheeple. Become your own person. You guys keep writing stuff, and I'm just keeping on going. But the whole point of today's program, pretty much assessed in the first 30 minutes. So go and watch that. Peter, are you running out of guests? I told you preaching to the choir gets old. Do you agree? No idea what you're talking about. Not running out of guests. I had a guest today. Jerome Knight was going to be on the program, but and I understand totally why, he got confused with the time zones. And when I said 5:30 Pacific, he thought I meant 5:30 p.m. UK, where he lives. So we're going to do our interview in a couple of weeks. Bill Fritz is on again tomorrow, talking about Ellen White and did she plagiarize? And David says, great show, Peter. You bring like-minded people together. Thank you. And I like bringing non-like-minded people together, like Michael C. as well. Oh, that's right. Michael C. is the troll pretending, always digging for provocative responses. Glacier View was a foregone conclusion. In 1979, I overheard Ed Thiel telling another church member that Des will be dealt with. Yeah. Peter, you made this macho man laugh out loud. I've been very hard on Johnson. He was instructed by Neil Wilson. I'm glad I made you laugh. Say hey. And I was in Des's Daniel class for a while at PUC in the fall of 79. I had lunch with a very good friend of mine yesterday, and we're catching up on Tuesday to have a more deep conversation. But he was in Des Ford's theology class or pastor's class for 2 years. I think 69 and 71. Would Des have been lecturing there at Avondale then, Gillian? And he said, boy, I loved Des Ford. I would never have gotten the gospel without him. He then ended up leaving Avondale, going to uni and moving on to other things. Rick, I have never eaten haystacks. I'm going to do a program. I'll take my camera into the kitchen and show you how to make the Peter Dixon haystack. And I'll even teach him the secret ingredients to my sauce. And David says, I don't ever want to eat another haystack again. Well, we're getting off track. Let's just see. I think we'll leave it there, everybody. And thank you so much again. Today's program, unexpected, but brewing in the back of my mind for a long time, the lie at the heart of Glacier View. And that lie was that church leaders said after Glacier View that the majority didn't go along with Des. That's the lie. The truth is the majority did agree with Des's views and teachings. There was consensus, a consensus statement, 2 parts, read out, voted on. The majority agreed with it. That's the truth. Church leaders, stop perpetuating the lie. This is the challenge. Will one church leader out there watching please come on the show and publicly say, we agree that we perpetuated this lie. It was false. It wasn't true. The majority did agree with Des Ford. That's the challenge. I hope you'll join me tomorrow, and I hope you'll join me in spreading this lie-truth conundrum. Thanks, everyone.
Desmond Ford's teachings were tested against the scripture, and the Glacier View group testing them against the scriptures did not see light in his view. It is out of that context, not against Ellen White.
Friday morning, the consensus statement that we developed was brought to the floor. It was read, it was discussed, and it was voted. If not unanimously, very close. And very interestingly, Desmond Ford said, I can agree with everything in this statement.